Hey, Villies,
Yes, Hortensius?
we need to talk about the opening statement Cicero gave. Do I'm prosecuting you for your corruption?
Well, what did you think?
Well,
And these are the Verrine Orations. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Verrine Orations, Part 4, The Trial. Last episode, we learned how Cicero beat Hortensius's clever move to win the trial by nominating Verres' friend and former quaestor to serve as a really bad prosecutor instead of Cicero. This week, we'll talk about what Cicero did in the actual trial. Like every lawyer who's ever tried a case, Cicero needed to gather evidence. That meant gathering documents, interviewing witnesses, preserving their testimony. Easier said than done when you're living in ancient Rome. Problem 1: distance. Verres committed his crimes in Sicily, an island off the southern coast of Italy. That's at least 450 miles from Rome. 450 miles may be just a long road trip in today's world, but in ancient times, it's a really, really long road trip on foot, donkey, maybe a horse, slow boat, I don't know. And Sicily is a big island with a lot of ground to cover. Problem 2: time. Hortensius's next trick was to schedule another corruption trial that would start 2 days before Verres's. The facts in that other trial took place in Greece. If that other fake prosecutor could get his act together, maybe he could tie up the courts so there wouldn't be room for Cicero to prosecute Verres until maybe next year. Problem 3: politics. If Hortensius could make the trial of Verres start next year, Hortensius would be consul, one of the two chief magistrates in Rome. And another friend of Verres would be the urban praetor, who would serve as the judge in Verres' trial. Push the trial date late enough so it wouldn't be done before January, and the case would have to start all over again on terms much more favorable to Verres. Cicero took each one of those problems and beat them down. Distance? Schmistance. Cicero traveled light with just his legal secretary, Tyro. They must have set records, and they got right to work. They had to, because in the ancient world, something we take for granted, writing things down, was extremely difficult. But Cicero and Tyro did it. Must have been in record time because they got their evidence and raced back to Rome, arriving before that other prosecutor had even bothered to leave Italy. Now for problem 3: politics. This one's tough. That's because of the way the big trials worked in the Roman Republic. The prosecutor could give an opening statement that would last for days. Then the defense attorney could give a counter opening statement that could last for days. Take time for a break. Maybe there's more speeches, maybe reading documents, examining witnesses, examination, cross examination, and then the defense puts on its case and the same thing starts all over again. And then, of course, closing arguments. This was a problem because Cicero was coming to the end of the year, and there were lots of Roman holidays when the courts would be closed. And that meant delay. A skillful defense attorney like Hortensius could take full advantage and drag things out to January. And in January, there'd be new magistrates. Hortensius would be consul with all new powers. And Roman religion said the trial had to start all over again. So if Cicero acted like most prosecutors, he would run out of time and lose. Newsflash: Cicero was not most prosecutors. He wouldn't stick to the normal rules. He came up with his own. Or rather, he revived an old trial technique that had fallen out of favor. Don't give a long opening statement that would last a few days. Give a short one, maybe half an hour or so. That means that Hortensius has to give an opening statement that could last maybe half an hour or so. Instead of starting next week, Hortensius, start now. Your turn. And what a half hour it was for Cicero. It had everything: politics, corruption, crime. It laid out all the evidence with devastating efficiency and attention to detail. And it had a great ending. One word: Dixie, past tense of the Latin word for to speak. So when Cicero says at the end of his opening statement, Dixie, he's saying something like, I spoke. But in context, it has to mean more like, I'm done speaking. Perhaps more colloquially, I'm finished with this guy. So let's go back to that imaginary dialogue between Verres and Hortensius that began this episode.
So, yeah, viewers, we were talking about Cicero's opening statement that ended a few minutes ago.
Yes, Hortensius. What did you think?
I think you're losing. Actually, I think you've lost.
But you're the greatest orator in Rome.
And you're the guiltiest man in Rome. Get out of town and never come back.
And that's pretty much what happened. Hortensius didn't even try to respond to Cicero's speech, he just surrendered. As for Verres, he fled, and he never came back to Rome. But that's not quite the end of our story, because Cicero suddenly had a lot of great material he thought he would be able to use at a trial that just ended in complete and total victory before it hardly got started. Next week, in our last episode, I'll tell you what Cicero did with that material, how some of it lives on to this day, and let you know what happened to the people you've learned about in these, the first 4 episodes of the Verrine Orations.